Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So it's been a while since I've been on here for a few different reasons. First of all, I haven't had much time lately. I've been super busy. And also, we've been so sick. I know that there's all kinds of bugs going around, and it seems like it's hit pretty hard this year, and that was certainly the case for us. So I'm back now, and as I think of topics and have people request topics, I'll start filming more content. So this topic today is based on a conversation I had with someone today, and it's about the timeline of recovery because I think I know this is a really common question and something that people struggle with and want to know more about. And it's how long is this going to take until I feel better? And now, obviously, there's generalizations. I'm basing my answer on generalizations, averages, things that I've seen anecdotally in the many people that I've talked to over the past 7 years, hundreds, if not thousands of people, and those that I've coached. And obviously, there's going to be outliers. This is not going to apply to everybody. And also keep in mind that I would say the vast majority of people that I've spoken to personally have a complex drug history or a situation where it's not just a simple one drug coming off one drug. It's often people are taken off whatever original drug they were on, whether it's a benzo, an antidepressant, whatever, a different type of psych drug, and they're tapered off too quickly. They go into withdrawal, and then nobody in the medical community is recognizing it as such, and they're just treating the symptoms that the person is having, which leads down a road of more and more drugs. And that's the most common scenario. There's obviously other ones as well, but this happens so often. And from that perspective, when someone has a bit of a more complicated drug history, I would say here's what I've observed. So the first 6 months tends to be the worst for people. And for whatever reason, 2 to 6 months is the absolute worst because a lot of people are experiencing, especially with serotonergic drugs, is that delayed response. So some people, not everyone, this was not my situation, go into a honeymoon period when they first get off the drug and they think that was pretty easy. I feel fine. I feel great. Some people will say they feel better than they've felt in years. And then all of a sudden, around 1 month off, 2 months off, 3 months off, but I would say the average is about 2 months, 2 to 3 months, they crash completely and then they get full blown withdrawal symptoms. So a lot of people will experience the worst of the worst in that 2 month to 6 months off. And I made a whole video about this called If You're 2 to 6 months Off Meds. So you might want to check that out if this pertains to you, if you're in that time frame. A lot of people then at around the 6 month mark will start to feel some windows. They might fully go into a windows and waves pattern, or they might just start getting glimmers of windows, meaning for an hour here and there, they're feeling 50% relief of symptoms, or they're totally asymptomatic, but that's not very common. It's usually just a reduction or a drastic reduction in symptoms for short-ish periods of time at 6 months off. So they're starting to experience their first windows, their first glimmers of normality, of hope, whatever the case may be. And then between 6 and 18 months is when people really go into this windows and waves pattern, like fully. And what often happens is that the windows and waves change within that time frame. So it'll be just glimmers at the beginning, and then the windows tend to get longer and brighter, meaning, more hopeful, less symptoms, no symptoms, just the return of old self. Excuse me. And then the waves will go from long, super intense, and then get shorter and shorter and shorter. And so it just kind of goes from mostly waves, little windows, to that changes to more windows, less waves. I want to comment on, though, this further by saying that I think one of the things that's missing personally from the community in the communication of this is that, yes, that's typically the trajectory, but just because it's not perfectly linear is not something to panic about in my experience. So what I mean by that is someone might be following that pattern perfectly. 6 months starts, they're getting glimmers, they're getting windows. As it goes further and further along, they are having this pattern of windows getting longer and brighter, waves getting shorter, less intense. But this doesn't typically go perfectly. So it might start that way, and then someone will, the pattern will change where all of a sudden they're hit with just this massive wave and they don't know where it came from. And it can really be a shock to the system in multiple ways. And people a lot of times tend to freak out, panic, understandably, because if you have this idea in your head that it's always going to be shorter, longer, longer, shorter with the windows and waves pattern, and then suddenly it changes, a lot of people will, and I coached a lot of people like this, and they'll say, this must mean I'm getting worse, this must mean it's degenerative, this must mean it's progressive. And in my experience, that's not usually the case. The case typically is following this pattern and then suddenly the pattern changes, but that's not an indication that things are getting worse or that there's no hope to be had. And a lot of people too, there's that, I want to comment on two things within this. The first one is the 10-month wave, which I'm realizing a lot of people haven't heard of. So I first discovered this phenomenon, I believe it was on Surviving Antidepressants, and they used to have it sort of like pinned to their page. And when I went to search it recently, I didn't see that, but they used to have it where they had it as one of their main sort of headlines, or part of their main subjects was this 10-month wave. And the way they described it was a lot of people will experience a surge of symptoms in this 10-month wave, but they gave a range, which was 7 to 12 months. So not meaning that the whole window was like 5 months long, 7 months to 12 months, but that within that time frame, a lot of people will get a surge of symptoms. And so that can certainly happen. It's not a guarantee, but that's a pretty well-known phenomenon. That was the one thing. Now I've completely lost my train of thought for what the other thing was, but that 10-month surge is really common. And so is this nonlinear within the sort of generalizations of that windows and waves pattern between 6 to 18 months off of the drug or off of your last drug. So that's something I wanted to comment on because it's relevant for a lot of people. If I think of what I was going to say, I'll come back to it. But just for now, I want to keep going. So then a lot of times between 18 to 24 months is when people will, quote, turn a corner, meaning the symptoms really start to improve. Some people will then completely heal or have that final surge. Maybe that was what I was going to comment on. So if you've seen, there's other people talking about this on their channels, that final surge. I've witnessed this when I was coaching people where, they're following this sort of predictable pattern. They crash into the worst wave ever, and then they heal after that. So the wave is really intense. It might seem long, or it might be long, and then they just heal right after that. I've seen that several times. And then so that I wanted to comment on that. And then 18 to 24 months, a lot of people will, quote, turn a corner and really experience a lot of healing. Now, this isn't the case for everybody. Some people won't, but there's a lot of people that do follow that pattern. If you get into or closer to the 2-year mark and you don't feel like you're recovered, then this is what a lot of people in the community define as being protracted, is 2 years and further off and not being healed. And so that's certainly the case for some people. And I'd never say that to scare anybody, because I know if you're early on and you hear that, you might be kind of panicking. But I think it's important to just frame this in a way that kind of gives people an understanding of what's common, but also be realistic and acknowledging of the people that don't heal at that point. And I'm not here to try to gaslight or say anything about those people. I mean, it took me 4.5 years from when I stopped my first drug to really feel like I was getting better. So my journey was very long. But I want to know if this is typical or if this has been your pattern. And I'm going to call this video the timeline of recovery, or the recovery timeline, because I think, again, it's important to discuss. And, I hesitate sometimes making videos like this because there's sort of two sides of this. And I just sort of talked about that. On the one side, you want to be honest and give people some type of expectation, but also not scare people and also not invalidate the people that aren't experiencing it exactly like this. And the conversation that I had that sparked the idea for this video, we were talking about that awareness that for some people it is long. It's a fine balance between that awareness, but not getting stuck in that headspace or that or other people's experiences. And I always draw it back to diabetes. And I gave this person the example of when I got diagnosed, I knew that it could have horrible outcomes like blindness, limb amputation, kidney failure, gastroparesis, things like that, because I have a cousin who is completely blind from my type of diabetes. I mean, totally blind, can't see light, has glass eyes. And so I was aware of that when I got diagnosed. So we have the same disease, we have the same condition, and seeing that that could be my future, because she came and visited me in the hospital. And so that was a real fear of mine. Like, oh my goodness, this can be the outcome for me. And the whole genetic idea was in my head because I'm related to this person. And there was a lot of fear. But I have long surpassed her in the sense of she was already blind for many years at the point that I'm at in the diabetes journey. 27 years. She was already blind for, I think, 10 years at this point. Obviously, that was not my outcome. So I was aware that that could happen when I got diagnosed. Wasn't my experience, and who knows? Like, I don't know what the future is going to hold, but just knowing that my eyes are completely fine. I just had them tested, and that is not my reality right now is, I think, important to keep in mind, because you can get so stuck in, I have withdrawal or I have an adverse reaction. I took the same drugs as person B and this is their experience. And you just completely freak out and panic. And it's understandable because this experience is so scary. But at the same time, I just want to reiterate the importance of trying to stay in your own experience, because that is not necessarily the outcome for you. And so yeah, I just wanted to say that. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments and what your own experience has been for the timeline of this journey. And yeah, I hope you guys are doing well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.